NBC News in Washington, Meet the Press with David Gregory.
Good morning. As high-level talks over raising the nation's debt limit stalled last week, the president himself steps directly into the negotiations with top Republican leaders Senator Mitch McConnell and House Speaker John Boehner in a White House meeting now set for tomorrow. A new poll out this weekend by the Associated Press shows a deeply divided American public, 41% opposed to raising the debt limit, 38% in favor. Yesterday, I sat down with New Jersey's Republican Governor Christie, who is coming off a big budget victory this week in his home state. Late Thursday night, the Democratic-controlled New Jersey State Assembly passed landmark cost-cutting legislation to close the massive budget gap due to the state's pension and health benefit obligations to public employees. The victory came after months of a tense budget back and forth and capped off a dramatic day in which union protesters gathered outside the Capitol to protest the legislation. The new plan will increase the amount public employees pay for their health care and pension plans and end the ability for unions to collectively bargain for their medical benefits. It will also cut off automatic cost of living increases by giving authority over those adjustments to an independent board. In total, it is expected that the deal will save the state of New Jersey more than $120 billion over the next 30 years. Governor Christie is expected to sign the bill now Tuesday and has said that the approach in New Jersey should be a national model. Governor Christie, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Happy to be here.
I want to talk more about the pension victory in just a minute, but what you're dealing with in New Jersey is obviously the big battle here in Washington, too. That is the debt. That is closing the budget deficit. And we have an impasse here in Washington. Now the president's going to have to step up his involvement. The battle, of course, between spending and taxes. What's the way out of this mess here?
The first thing is that the president had to get involved personally. And what I found in New Jersey in our experience in dealing with what you just talked about was there is no substitute for the three leaders in the room having to look at each other and having to hash this out. And everybody's got to put skin in the game, David. I mean, I gave on things that I wanted. Obviously, the Democratic Senate president in my state and the Democratic Speaker gave on things they wanted, and we came to a compromise that didn't violate our principles, and that's the key. You can't ask people to violate their principles. And so there has to be a way to find principled outcome where people are also compromising. And what the specifics that's going to be are going to be up to the president, the speaker, and Senator Reid. But they need to get in the room and finish this off.
The president himself has a certain leadership style. You said yours is different.
Yeah.
How so? And where do you think the president has gone wrong, particularly in this fight over the debt and the deficit?
Well, listen, here's what I did in New Jersey. I put out this pension and benefit plan first in September. And I did 30 town hall meetings across my state selling the plan, increasing the public pressure on the legislature that something needed to be done, and convincing the public that my approach was a reasonable one. Now, I compromised off my approach, but I think if you're the executive, you've got to be the guy who's out there pushing and leading. You can't lay back and wait for somebody else to do it. And I think if the president's made a mistake here, it's this laid back kind of approach where he's waiting for someone else to solve the problem. Some people say it's a political strategy. No matter what it is, it's not effective in solving problems. I think what we did in New Jersey proves that's the effective way to do it. The executive needs to lead and then bring people to the table to forge compromise.
Do tax increases of some stripe have to be on the table in these national budget talks, whether they're revenue increases that don't come from changing tax rates, but some other way to increase revenue at the same time that you're cutting spending back?
You know, I don't know, David, but I'll tell you this. Those guys sitting around that table are the ones who are in the best position to make those decisions. They're the ones who've studied the federal budget and what's going forward here, and they're the ones who are going to have to decide what the elements have to be. But I will tell you that I get a sense in New Jersey, at least from our perspective, that our state is extraordinarily overtaxed. We're the most overtaxed state in America by all the calculations. And so I know there's not an appetite in my state for increased taxes because people think government spends too much in our state.
You hear a lot of national Republicans and Tea Party Republicans, like Senator DeMint of South Carolina. He said this week, look, there's got to be a balanced budget amendment if we're going to ultimately raise the debt ceiling, which is what is at issue here in the debt talks, raising that debt ceiling so America doesn't default and can't pay its bills any longer. And without that, there'd be extreme political peril for Republicans, he warned. This is what he said to ABC this week.
I think based on what I can see around the country, not only are those individuals gone, but I suspect the Republican Party would be set back many years.
He's saying if they don't vote for it, Republicans could be voted out of office and the Republican Party could really be set back. Is the Tea Party going too far? Is there too much of a purity test here?
Well, I don't think there should be purity tests on people. I think we have to make common sense judgments on things. However, as I said before, we got to stand by our principles. And I do think that the Republican Party here in Washington has said that they want some significant commitment to long-term deficit and debt reduction. And I think just from a common sense economic perspective, David, we have to have that. And so let's get to the table and decide how we do that. And I don't think there should be any litmus tests on it when you walk into the room. I think we have to trust Speaker Boehner and Senator Reid, President of the United States, to sit around that table and make these determinations. But what I will say is, if you're not going to have significant debt and deficit reduction, this country is careening into an economic crisis that none of us are going to be able to handle.
Is it worth forcing the issue? You're a national Republican, as well as governor of New Jersey, forcing the issue to ultimately risk America defaulting on its obligations?
If the president and these guys lead, we're never going to get to that point.
But why are we so entrenched? I mean, what you achieved in New Jersey, pension reform that other states haven't been able to accomplish. You say it's a national model, but of course the Democratic Party is in a different state in New Jersey. The politics are different there. What's different where you are and how entrenched Washington remains?
Well, listen, because what we did in New Jersey was, you remember, Democratic-controlled legislature, conservative Republican governor, but we didn't demagogue each other. And I think what happens here, and what both parties have been guilty of over time, is demagoguing each other, so then it makes it almost impossible for you to sit across the table and bargain with each other. Listen, you've read some of the things I've said over time. I'm no wallflower, and I disagree strongly, bluntly, but I'm not demagoguing people. And I think that the difference in what we've done in New Jersey is, I've said, listen, I'll sit down with the Democrats and discuss at any time, any of the issues they want to talk about, but we've got to treat each other with some sense of fairness.
Can you get back to where you were in New Jersey in terms of the promises made and promises kept to union folks who work throughout your state in terms of pension contributions from the state, or is this really mark a new day?
Sure, no. In part, David, part of the deal is that we say now the right to those payments are a contractual right by those employees, which means they can now sue if the state doesn't make those payments. That was one of the things I gave on, to show them good faith. Also, I'm making the first pension payment this year that's been made in years, and only the third that's been made in 17 years. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is as well in making pension payments into the fund. This is not about hurting union workers. In fact, what this is, it's helping them, because you know what? There's one independent study that said that our pension system could have been insolvent by 2018. That's unacceptable to me. And so we brought a bipartisan group together to say, listen, we got to fix this because those people earn those pensions and they deserve to get them. But we can't have this always on the back of the taxpayers in New Jersey. The middle class was suffocating in my state and they needed some relief, and this is part of it.
Let me get you to assess the president's performance in a couple of other areas. Afghanistan, do you think he's pulling troops out too fast?
You know, David, as the governor of New Jersey, I got to tell you, I'm not going to put my judgment in the place of the President of the United States, who is briefed on this much more extensively than I am. And so I'm just not going to go there with that. I will tell you.
You've said that you
I'm not a nation-building guy. I'm not a nation-building guy. And I do think that we have achieved a lot of what we wanted to achieve in Afghanistan, especially after the murder of bin Laden. But he knows a lot more about this than I do. I'm not going to go down that road.
What about gas prices? Do you think it was the right thing to do to tap the strategic reserves to drive down gas prices?
I'm concerned about that. I think the strategic reserves are for strategic purposes and not political purposes.
You thought this was a political move?
Well, I think it looks like that. I don't know if it was, but I think it looks like that, and that gives me some concern because it hurts the credibility of the program if people feel that's the way it was used.
What about the economy overall? You believe in cutting spending in your state and on the national level. What about the Fed chief this week who warned, look, if we're too aggressive about cutting spending, we're going to hurt recovery and restoration of jobs?
We're at no risk of being too aggressive in cutting spending. You see what we're doing down here? We're at no risk of being too aggressive in cutting spending. I think we have a long way to go before we have to worry about what Chairman Bernanke had to say this week. We have to prove we can actually do it. You saw the minuscule amount of money we were arguing over in the spring this year. This is not a large amount of money in terms of how much the overall spending of the federal government is.
On taxes, you believe in kind of standard Republican fare. Less taxes, less regulation. The reality, in terms of middle-class wage growth, is that it's not growing. Even in better economic times than we're in right now, with tax cuts, the middle class is still not making more. What are Republicans going to do about that?
Well, I think what we're trying to do in New Jersey is 3 of the last 4 months, we've had private sector job growth, about 30,000 new private sector jobs over the last 4 months. And we're also seeing wage growth in New Jersey as well, and are seeing our income tax revenue increase. We have about $500 million more in income tax revenue than we projected for this coming year. And so we're starting to see that happen in New Jersey a little bit. I think one of the reasons why is because we're giving them certainty regarding taxes and regulation, and they're not concerned about it going up, so things are starting to bubble up and grow again. But overall, for our country, there has to be greater economic growth. If we don't have greater economic growth, the middle class is not going to see great wage growth at all. That's what we need to do, is to grow the pie bigger, and we haven't been doing that of late.
Let's talk a little bit about politics. Hill newspaper has the most coveted political endorsements, and you're in the top 10. Will you endorse in the primary season?
Not necessarily.
But you might. You'll think about it.
I might. Listen, I'm under no legal obligation to. How about that? And so we'll see. I'm not, you know me, I'm not a halfway kind of guy. So if, in fact, I feel really strongly about someone, that person would be the best president of the United States, then I'm going to get out there and go full force for that person. If I don't feel that way, I won't.
Do you have a Christie out there? By that I mean, is there somebody who's not in the field that you think should be in?
No. I think at the end of the day, I don't make decisions about who should be in the field or not. Having gone through that, that's a very personal decision.
What about Michelle Bachmann? She'll announce tomorrow, the early part of the week. Is she a viable candidate in your mind?
Oh, listen, I think that she's a person who is serious about what she believes in. I don't know her all that well. I only know what I've seen on TV, and that sometimes isn't the most reliable in the world. So I'm going to wait to watch her and make my judgment as to whether I think she's someone who can win. I don't know her all that well. I've met her a couple of times. Let's see how she performs. She's put herself out there, so now let's see how she performs.
So what are you looking for? I mean, you talk about the bigness of politicians in terms of loftier politics. It's something that you'd like to see. It's something you're trying to bring to New Jersey. Who represents that?
Listen, I think what any one of them could, if they're willing to be authentic. I think what the American people want more than anything else right now is someone who's just going to look them in the eye and tell them the truth, even some truths that they don't like. But they have to believe the person speaking from their heart and are authentic. And I think that's what allows you to do the big things like we're doing in New Jersey. It's not that I'm universally loved. We know I'm not in New Jersey. But what they do say in New Jersey is, we like him and we think he's telling us the truth. I think we need to have that type of politics on the national level.
Couple of questions about social issues. There's been some questions raised about an abortion pledge within the Republican field. Is that something that you would sign?
Listen, I haven't seen the abortion pledge. I don't know what it says. Here's my position.
Basically, all pro-life candidates, only pro-life people working for you, a promise to back anything, that coincides with the life agenda, defunding public payments for abortion across the board.
Listen, here's my position on it. My name's the name on the ballot. I am pro-life. I believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and life for the mother. That's my position. Take it or leave it.
What about same-sex marriage? New York, of course, has passed this, historic for the state. Do you think states like New York should have the right to do what they did, or do you believe in a constitutional amendment that would bar states from passing same-sex marriage laws?
I'll tell you, in New Jersey, we have a civil union law, and we had a very vigorous debate in late 2009, early 2010, before I became governor, about same-sex marriage, and it failed in the state legislature under a Democratic legislature with Democratic Governor John Corzine. And so my view on it is, in our state, we're going to continue to pursue civil unions. I am not a fan of same-sex marriage. It's not something that I support. I believe marriage should be between one man and one woman. That's my view, and that'll be the view of our state, because I wouldn't sign a bill like the one that was in New York.
Let me ask you about your own political standing. You made some tough choices. That doesn't always make you friends. This is your standing in terms of your public approval. In February, you up over 50%. You're down now, more disapproval at 47%. And if your critics could grasp at some things to build a narrative against you, they would say, look, yeah, this guy's tough talking, no nonsense. He is who he is. There's been a number of incidents that make you, to some, come across as not somebody who likes to be questioned. You've been asked about this repeatedly. Here's one example.
You feel that way? You're sitting here questioning me. You feel like I don't like to be questioned? I mean, I'm happy to be questioned.
Yeah, no, I think you are in an interview format like this. But there have been examples. The question having to do with why you send your kids to parochial schools. You did a recent show. Here's a portion of it.
You don't send your children to public schools, you send them to private schools, so I was wondering why you think it's fair to be cutting school funding to public schools.
Talk to Gail.
Hey, Gail, you know what? First off, it's none of your business. I don't ask you where you're sending your kids to school. Don't bother me about where I send mine.
Now, I'm familiar with the substance of what you said, which is you're a taxpayer, you pay property taxes, you're the governor of everybody, you're working for the best public schools for everybody. For religious reasons, you and your wife decide to send your kids to parochial schools. My question is more about your temperament. Should the chief executive speak to people that way?
Damn right he should. You know why? Because this is who I am. And the public knows they get it straight from me. And so what I said to her was, don't question my wife and my parenting decisions. That's the most personal thing that you can say to someone. You're a father. You know this. These parenting decisions we make from the heart. There's no one more precious in my life than my wife and my 4 children. And when we make those decisions, that's not appropriate for public inquiry. I made that decision because I believe, David, in my heart, that's the right thing. And so you know what? I am very blunt. I am very direct, and you know what? So is she. And you look at her tone and her demeanor in that question, so is she. She's questioning my ability as a public office holder to make decisions about every child in New Jersey in their public education because my children go to parochial school. Well, I went to public schools in New Jersey. I'm a product of the public schools. And so, you know what? Absolutely. I wish more people in public life would respond just that way.
But authenticity is one thing, but we all can be better in the public square, how we interact with people. Are you too abrasive? Are you too stubborn? Are you too tough when it comes to people questioning you?
I'm huggable and lovable, David. I am not abrasive at all. Listen, I'm honest, and I wish we had more of it in politics. You know what people are tired of in politics? They're tired of blow-dried, tested answers that are given by political consultants to politicians, and everybody sounds the same. Everybody sounds the same. I don't sound the same. And you know why? Because I say what I believe from my heart. And if some people are offended by that, I'm sorry. I really am. But you know what? I think more people in New Jersey and around the country who've seen that are going to say, you know what? I'm glad he stood up for his rights as a father and his wife's rights as a mother to decide what they want to decide and not to be questioned about it by anybody. It's not costing anybody anything for me to send my kids to parochial school. And you know what? At the end of the day, I think every parent should have the right to decide that most important decision, how their child should be educated.
Your team has produced a web video talking about the accomplishment on pension reform, and I want to play a portion of it.
Step by step, we are putting ourselves on a better, more sustainable path and pushing ahead on the road to growth. That is the model for the way forward.
That looks like a campaign that you could run in Iowa, and you're going to be in Iowa in July.
I am. July 25th, I'll be in Iowa with Governor Branstad to talk about the last of the 3 big things, David. In January, I said 3 big things for New Jersey. Keep our budget under control, and I will do that by June 30th. Pension and benefit reform will be done on Tuesday when I sign it. And the last bit, educational reform to improve our educational system for every kid in New Jersey. That's what I'm turning to next. And then we'll be able to do one of those that says all 3 big things are done.
So you said you will not run for president in 2012. You won't rule out 2016. If they came to you and said, hey, be on the ticket, I know you've said in the past you're not a VP kind of guy, but you still feel that way?
David, can you imagine? I mean, the person who picked me as vice president would have to be sedated. I mean, seriously, forget it.
Well, yeah, right. I thought you were huggable and lovable.
I am, but you know, I think I am. But you also saw the answer I gave to Gail. I mean, that's who I am, and I don't think that's vice presidential material.
Well, that's actually an interesting point. Temperamentally, do you think you are not somebody who could weather the kind of scrutiny you'd get in that position as a VP candidate or a presidential candidate well?
No, listen, David, I think I've been scrutinized as much as any governor across America. I've had plenty of criticism thrown my way and a lot of scrutiny thrown my way. What you're misunderstanding about that piece is that was personal. That was about my children. You asked me about taxes, about spending, about all the other issues. You asked me about a lot of tough issues this morning. You didn't see me react in any way. I gave you my answers that I feel from my heart. But my children are different. I'm a father first. And I'm not going to let people question my parenting decisions in public.
So final question. What would you like your role in the campaign of 2012 to be?
To try to help whoever the Republican nominee is to become president of the United States so that we can make our country a better place for our children and grandchildren. Whatever I can do to help and contribute to that doesn't interfere with my primary duties, which are as governor of New Jersey, a husband and a father, I'll be happy to do.
Governor, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David.